Masechet Avodah Zara Daf Nun Vav. Ve'eno ose ye nesech ad sheyered labor. Our Mishnah taught that when you put grapes in the upper vat and step on them, they're still not considered wine. And therefore, in that vat, even if the non-Jew would touch them with his hands, it still would not become yayin nesech in the upper vat. Rather, when does it become wine? When is the process considered sufficiently completed that now you can call it wine and it can become prohibited as yayin nesech? Only when it flows down into the lower vat. Then whatever is in the lower vat is considered wine, and if the non-Jew touches that in the lower vat will become prohibited, but whatever remains in the upper vat still remains permitted. That was the opinion of our Mishnah. But now we're going to see one or even two other opinions about when something becomes classified as wine. V'hatanya yayin mishayik peh. There is a Mishnah in Masechet Ma'asrot. Now this is for a different law, not for defining when something can become idolatrous wine, but rather when does something have an obligation to take ma'aser? The law is you only have to take teruman ma'aser from produce when the processing is completed. You don't have to do it when it's out in the field. You don't have to do it while you're still manufacturing it. So, regarding wine, the Mishnah said it's when it floats. Now here's the process. It goes from the upper vat, you step on it, and it flows down through that pipe into the lower vat. And then they leave it in the lower vat for a while until the sediment floats to the top. And then they'll skim off the top, and so you'll have wine that's clearer. Afterwards, they take that wine and siphon it into a barrel. And then they leave it in the barrel for a while until there's still some residue, will float to the top, and they can skim that off as well. So here it says, from the time that it floats to the top, which is a later time, not when it gets into the vat, but rather some hours later when it floats. So how can we understand this contradiction? Amar Rava lakashya, Rabbi Akiva harabanan ditnan, yayin mishered labor, Rabbi Akiva omer misheyikpeh. So Rava says there's no problem here because we can explain that our Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbanan, whereas the Mishnah in Masechet Ma'asrot is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, as we have in a Baraita. Says Ditnan here, is everything switched over here. The V'hatanya is actually a Mishnah, and Ditnan, which usually indicates a Mishnah, is actually a Baraita. So this is Baraita number one. We're going to see a parallel Baraita in just a minute. But this Baraita says that wine, once it goes into the lower vat, that's the cistern, the lower vat, then already it becomes necessary to take ma'aser. This is in the context of ma'aser. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, only once it floats on top. So we see that within the law of Maaser, there are two opinions. The Rabbanan are more stringent as soon as it goes into the lower vat. Rabbi Akiva is more lenient. He says, no, you have some more time until it floats to the top. And therefore, we can explain that our Mishnah regarding Yayin Nesech is the opinion of Rabbanan, that's Stam Mishnah, whereas that Stam Mishnah in Masechet Masrot that says when it floats, that is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. That's Rava's answer. Ibaya kipui debor o kipui dechabit. And now we have a question. When Rabbi Akiva says here, from the time that it floats, there's actually two floating steps. Is it the floating in the lower vat or the floating in the barrel, which is even later? After, as we said, you siphon it into the barrel and you wait there until the sediment will float to the top, and that sediment technically goes to the bottom. Some goes to the bottom, other things go and float to the top. So maybe it's the second one. Which one did Rabbi Akiva mean? Tashema detanya yayin mishikpe afal pi shekafa kolet min hagata alyona umin asinor veshoteh shema mina kipui debor kaamrinan shema mina. We learned in the continuation of that Mishnah in Masechet Maasrot. We already saw the beginning that says wine. One is obligated to take maaser, and you can't drink it unless you take maaser. You have to take maaser once it starts floating. So now floating where? Floating in the lower vat or floating in the barrel? It must be be floating in the lower vat, because the continuation talks about the steps that are right before the floating. And so it says, even though the dregs started floating, technically the scum that's on top started floating, one can still take some wine from the upper vat or from the pipe and drink it. You can drink whatever's in the upper vat or in the pipe, and you can drink it without taking maaser, because that is still not processed. And even though part of the wine is pouring down into the lower vat and is floating, so you can't take that you have to take maaser, but that doesn't make prohibited whatever is in the upper vat. So we can learn from here that when this Mishnah says mishikpeh, it's talking about the lower vat. If it was talking about the barrel, then it would say, oh, only the wine once it's floating in the barrel, but in the lower pit would be permitted. It doesn't say that. So it's clear that it's going one step before, and so if one step before is the pipe, then the next step is in fact the lower vat, and so that's what this Mishnah means. So Rabbi Akiva so far only says that one is only somewhat lenient in saying that you can wait until it floats in the lower vat. He didn't say you can wait till it floats in the barrel, which would be even later. However, now we're going to see a different version of Rabbi Akiva. But we have another version of a baraita that Rav Zavid teaches from the school of Rabbi Oshaya, which also in the context of Ma'asrot, and it says wine, once it goes into the lower vat and floats, only then is it liable to maaser. It's permitted to have some before that. And Rabbi Akiva says one step further, only when it is siphoned into barrels. See, in this version of the Baraita, Tanakama says what we quoted Rabbi Akiva saying before, and Rabbi Akiva is one step more lenient. So what do we do with Rav Zavid? And the answer has a contradiction between this Baraita and the previous Baraita. And the answer is Tarsa named hachkamaitachi yain mishired labor vikper Rabbi Akiva omer misheshta bechaviyot. Let's reword the first Baraita. This first Baraita that we quoted we have to change it. It's not correct. This Baraita, remember, said Tanakama says once it goes into the lower vat, and Rabbi Akiva says once it floats. No, change the wording to match the wording of this Baraita from the school of Rabbi Oshaya. According to Tanakama, it's once it floats in the lower vat, and Rabbi Akiva says only once you put it into barrels. But now, if we accept this version of the Baraita, then who is the opinion of the Mishnah? Because now we have the Mishnah that said something does not become yayin nesech, meaning it's not defined as wine through the processing until it goes into the lower vat. So according to the Mishnah, just going into the lower vat initially, that already is called wine. And according to this Baraita, the Tanakama of this Baraita says only when it floats in the lower vat. And Rabbi Akiva says that it's once it goes into the barrel. Lema telata Tana'ehi. Are there three different opinions now among the Tanaim? And we answer, no. La shani yayin nesech tachmiru berabanan. Yayin nesech is different. In that case, the rabbis were more stringent. So therefore, the rabbis themselves, when it comes to yayin nesech, they say we have to be stringent about this, and we're going to call it wine as soon as it enters into the lower vat. When it comes to maaser, which is less stringent, it's when it floats. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, for maaser you can be even more lenient, and it's when it goes into the barrel. However, according to Rava, who initially said that the Mishnah here is Rabbanan, and the Mishnah over there is Rabbi Akiva, and he did not say, we make a distinction between Yayin Nesech and Maaser. So we see that according to Rava, there is no distinction between Yayin Nesech and Maaser. So according to him, indeed, you will have to say that there are three opinions among the Tanaim. You have the Rabbanan, the anonymous opinion in our Mishnah, that says once it goes into the lower pit, immediately it becomes prohibited. And then you have the Mishnah in Masechet Ma'asrot that says once it floats in the lower pit. And then you have the opinion of Rabbi Akiva that was quoted in the Baraita that says only once it goes into the barrels. Ma shebabor asur v'ashe'ar mutar. The Mishnah continues and says, once the wine starts flowing down into the lower vat, whatever's in the lower vat will become prohibited as yain nesech, but that which remains in the upper vat and in the pipe, that's still permitted. Amar Rav Huna, lo shanu ela shelo echazir gargutni lagat, aval echazir gargutni lagat asur. Rav Huna is astringency when it comes to the basket. The gad gutni is a wicker basket, basically a filter that they would put at the end of the pipe in order to catch some of the skin and the pits and the stuff. And then what they would do sometimes is take that basket and the contents and empty it back into the upper vat. So Rav Huna says that with whatever's in the upper vat is permitted. That's true only if they did not empty out the contents of the basket into the upper vat. But if they did empty it out, then it's prohibited. So basically, Rav Huna is saying that whatever is in that basket, whatever passes through that basket, becomes prohibited, and therefore that juice that's still in that basket, they're putting it back into the upper vat, now becomes prohibited. Now, Rav Huna said that whatever's in the basket makes the whole upper vat prohibited, but what's in that basket? Why is that itself prohibited? It didn't go down into the lower vat; it was caught by the basket. So why should whatever's in the basket be prohibited? And the answer is ben nitzok, because of a liquid stream. This is a big matter of controversy during times of the second Bet HaMikdash between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the question is, if you have a vessel up on top and a vessel below, and you pour from the vessel on top down into the vessel below, and while you're pouring, there's a stream that's connecting the two. So is that considered one body of water? For example, if the bottom vessel was tameh, and the water in the bottom vessel tameh, would this stream connect the two such that the tum'ah would extend back upstream, and even the liquid that's in the top one would also become tameh? Or in this case, generally the Pharisees said no, a liquid stream does not connect for the laws of tum'ah. And so here we're asking, how does the stuff in the basket become tameh? So we're proposing maybe it's because a liquid stream. Now, while the wine is pouring out and it's going down from the upper into the pipe, and it's going through the basket. So at that point, the stream is connecting the basket to the lower vat. And since once it reaches the lower vat, it's prohibited. So that stream, everything that's connected to the stream also will be prohibited as yain nesech, and therefore the juice that's in the basket is prohibited. And then when you put it back in the upper vat, the whole upper vat becomes prohibited. So is that the reason? Shema mina nisok chibur. Should we conclude from this that a liquid stream is considered a connection? This is going to have huge ramifications in other areas of halacha, and generally we do not think that a nitzok is a connection. And the answer is kedetaneh bichia shepechasatu selochito hachanameh shepechasatu boro. We can answer that no, we're talking about a case where the lower vat is so full all the way up to the top that it's actually touching the basket. So it's not because of a liquid stream, but it's actually touching the basket. We're borrowing this answer from another place where the Bichia taught that if someone fills a flask of a non-Jew through a funnel. I have my wine, which is kosher wine, and I'm going to pour it into a funnel, and so it's going to go into the bottle of the non-Jew. And the law is that the funnel, whatever wine remains on the funnel, is prohibited. But the question is, why? I'm pouring into the funnel, it's going through the funnel, but then it continues down into the non-Jew's bottle. And so it doesn't. The funnel is not touching the lower bottle or the wine in the bottle. And so the Bichia said, "Oh, we're talking about a case where the wine in the non-Jew's bottle filled up all the way and touched the bottom of the funnel. So therefore, it's not because of a liquid stream." We had the same question there. How did the funnel become prohibited? Is it because of a liquid stream that's connecting the funnel to the wine at the bottom of the bottle? No, it's because the bottle fills up. And then the wine in the bottle, which is not kosher, touches the funnel itself. So therefore, the wine that's on the funnel is going to be prohibited. Not because of a liquid stream, but because it went all the way up. And so too, we can say the same thing here, that the level of the wine in the lower vat went all the way up and touched the basket. And then someone took from the basket and put it back in to the to the upper vat, and that's how it all becomes prohibited. Hahu Yenuka, but this is the Gemara's reinterpretation of the case that it filled up. But the Peshat of Rav Huna does not sound like that. And this statement of Rav Huna we can connect with the statement of Rav Huna that we saw in the previous daf, that once it starts flowing, even in the upper vat, once you open up a stopper and it's flowing, even in the upper vat, it becomes prohibited. So actually, it makes sense according to Rav Huna. Rav Huna is strict about this, even in a step before it goes to the lower vat. Seems to be the simple reading of Rav Huna, but the Gemara here is reinterpreting it to be more lenient. One time there was a child, very smart child, and he learned the whole tractate of Avodah Zarah when he was 6 years old. Amazing. So they went and tested him and asked him some questions. Is a Jew allowed to help out a non-Jew and tread on grapes that in a wine press that belongs to a non-Jew? And the kid, he knows his Mishnah, and he quoted the Mishnah that says, yes, a Jew is allowed to tread grapes in the wine press of a non-Jew. And the reason seems to be because, as we said, it only becomes yayin nesech in the lower vat. But then we ask, but isn't the non-Jew going to with his hands, take from some of the skin and the pits that are on the bottom of the upper pit and put them on a separate pile? So then, while he's doing that, he's touching the material and the liquid in the upper vat, and it will become prohibited. So it's interesting because generally we were saying that it does not become prohibited in the upper vat. Seems here that he doesn't just answer that way. Instead, he's going to answer desayerna lehu lideh. Oh, we're talking about a case where we tie the non-Jew's hands so that he can't touch it, so because his hands are tied. Why didn't we just say that it's not wine yet? It seems that we're already taking into account Rav Huna's stringency and second Mishnah, not Mishnah Rishonah, but that even in the upper vat, once it starts flowing, it already could be prohibited. And therefore, if the non-Jew would touch it, then even the upper vat would be prohibited, and it would be prohibited for a Jew to be treading with the non-Jew. So the child says, oh, you can tie his hands. No, but maybe the non-Jew will have intention of a libation with his foot. He'll pick up some wine, move around some wine with his foot, and have in mind that this will be a libation to his God. And the answer is nisuch deregel lashemen nisuch. No, pouring out a libation with one's foot, that's not called a libation. Even idolaters don't do that. It's not respectful. And therefore, there's no problem. We don't have to worry about him using his foot. And that's why the kid had some smart answers here. If you tie his hands, even if you follow the stringency of Rav Huna, then you don't have to worry, and the Jew can tread along with the non-Jew in the vat. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.